Worldember is the world-building challenge put on by Worlddanvil. Every December, they challenge writers and game creators and gamers and just fans of world building to create their own worlds using their platform over at worldanvil.com. This is not sponsored, but I will make sure there's a link in the description down below. The goal is to get 10,000 words written for your world. And it can be anything, really, but mostly it's geared toward the fantasy genre, and in particular, gaming. So D&D, Dungeons and Dragons, things like that. And I'm very interested in developing a world that I've had in my head for over a decade now. A world that I call Harsch Kingdom. This is going to be a campaign setting, but also a setting that I can tell stories in, not just at the gaming table, but in the pages of books and ebooks. I have stories that I want to tell in this Harsch Kingdom setting. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that and what I've been doing here in this video here at Dice Monster Dice. My name is Derek M. Cook. Thank you for spending a few minutes with me here on this YouTube channel. If you like what you see here, please hit subscribe and give me a little thumbs up. Maybe even leave a comment down below about some of your favorite worlds, imagined worlds out there when it comes to gaming and fantasy fiction. Now, the Harsch Kingdom setting, like I said, it's something that's been in my head for years. I actually started developing it, partly actually writing things down. I mean, I've got notes and notes from, like I said, over 10 years ago right here that I've managed to compile into one place, which I'm actually pretty impressed that I still have some of this stuff. But anyway, it's something that I started writing down over 10 years ago when I thought I was going to create a campaign setting for a Dungeons & Dragons 3.5 campaign and game. 3.5 being the edition that was out at the time. And I thought it really had some legs. I thought it was something that would be fun to do, but as I've talked about or kind of implied in previous videos, my gaming group kind of fell apart and I really kind of grew away from gaming at that point and I kind of abandoned it. I mean, some of the short stories were still kind of in my head, and I still even have one completed short story that I need to kind of, well, work on because it's been gathering virtual dust for over 10 years. But I do have these stories that I think could really work and still be fun to play in. Now that I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons again, I want to get back into Harsch Kingdom. And with the DM's Guild and Drive-Thru RPG and the open game license, I feel like it's something that I could actually not just create for my own games, but actually release and make available to you guys and gals. Any players that might be interested in my take on dark fantasy here in the Dungeons & Dragons gaming system. What do I mean by dark fantasy? Well, I'm a horror guy. I'm a monster kid. I do the Monster Kid Radio podcast. I watch monster movies all the time. I love that stuff. And I always like to have a little bit of an edge, a dark edge to my fantasy fiction. I think it probably should be no surprise to anybody that writers like Robert E. Howard are my preferred writers when it comes to fantasy and sword and sorcery. Tolkien, yeah, very important. But for me, it's Robert E. Howard, it's Conan the Barbarian, it's Cole the Conqueror. It's all of this incredible, weird tale, sword and sorcery material that has really informed and influenced me when it comes to what Dungeons & Dragons and what fantasy can be. I do blame a lot of this on Robert E. Howard. I also blame this on my creative writing high school teacher, who really was the man who introduced me to not just Robert E. Howard proper, but Dungeons & Dragons. And when he introduced me to Dungeons & Dragons, I picked up a couple of things. I learned some important lessons that would inform what my tastes were when it comes to pretty much all fantasy gaming moving forward. I think there's too much magic. I don't know if that's a hot take. I don't know if that's something that is going to turn people off, but I really feel like that once you have magic everywhere in a campaign setting, it's not magical anymore. There's nothing special about it. If everybody, and even barbarians in the Dungeons & Dragons setting, can do things that are magical, then why? Why does it matter? And if there is really a world in which everybody can start flinging magic around, why is it still stuck in... Why is it still stuck in this medieval setting? Why hasn't the setting evolved past what we typically consider this very Western European fantasy setting with swords and knights and jousting and all this kind of stuff? Why don't we have laser guns? Why don't we have advanced surgery? Why are we still in that setting, but we can do these incredibly magical things. It's something that was taught to me when I first learned how to play Dungeons & Dragons, and it's stuck with me ever since. It's something that I've struggled with when it comes to Dungeons & Dragons over the years, and it's something that whenever I run a game, typically of a homebrew variety, because campaign settings typically have their own rules, I try to make it clear. Magic is not available on every street corner. If your player characters walk into a village, they can't say, hey, I go to the magic shop, because there's not going to be a building that has a sign above the door that says, ye old magic shop. When they go into this shop, if they do find one that sells magic, they go up to the person running the store, hey, I'd like to buy a magic item. The guy's going to look at him like, what? Magic should be rare. There's not going to be a tub o' rings in the corner of a big barrel full of magical rings that you can just reach into. Heck, one thing that this teacher taught me when it came to Dungeons & Dragons, you walk into a store and ask for a magic sword, 9 times out of 10, he's going to sell you a magic sword. But it's going to be a cursed magic sword, and it's not going to be something that you want to hold on to. You've got to be very specific, and it's got to have a sense of wonder. There has to be, well, magic when it comes to magic in a fantasy setting for me. I know high fantasy, there's a lot of magical stuff going on, and it works for a lot of people. Dungeons & Dragons is more popular now than it ever has been. And if these talks about a movie happening with Chris Pine actually develop into something, it's going to become even more popular if it's taken seriously. It's really kind of a thing now. I mean, it's not something that we just do in the corners and not tell our parents we're doing on the weekends. It's something that, you know, it's part of the pop culture right now. And a lot of it is because of the magic, and I understand that. I don't know how you put the magic back in the bottle, the genie back in the bottle, so to speak. So I feel like I have a challenge ahead of me, an uphill challenge ahead of me when it comes to the Harsch Kingdom setting. I am trying to find a way to balance what I think is appropriate for a dark fantasy game, the level of magic you're going to have, with, well, a fun fantasy game. I'm not getting rid of all the magic. I'm not getting rid of demons and devils and wizards and all these things, but they're going to be presented a little differently. Some of the traditional magical classes for a Dungeons & Dragons game, well, I'm not going to say they're not available in the Harsch Kingdom setting, but I will say that there will be some restrictions, and the world itself will react to the presence of a wizard in a very particular way. I'll get into those details later on as I talk a little bit more about the world building and the world itself when it comes to the Harsch Kingdom game setting. I'm also going to be creating some other classes as well, player classes that can be used in this setting, and I want some other player races as well, and that's something else that I want to do with the Harsch Kingdom setting. Now, this is something that's been talked about by more established YouTubers in the role-playing game space online. A whole bunch of them have talked about what's happening with Dungeons & Dragons and Wizards of the Coast approach to races and kind of alignments, but mostly races when it comes to the various benefits, penalties, bonuses, all the different racial components that come with making a decision about what kind of race you want to play in this fantasy setting. In Dungeons & Dragons, when you first started the game back in the day with first edition AD&D, you had a handful of them. Human, half-elf, elf, dwarf, halfling, gnome, half-orc. I think I got them all. And that was it. Now, as the game has evolved, yeah, they've added a few others. They've added tieflings and Aasimar, and I think there's Goliaths now, and I think at one point I saw a template for a half-dwarf. I think that was in 3rd edition, though, or maybe 3.5. I don't remember at this point, but the bottom line is that you could do anything you wanted. And I'm a big fan of playing these other fantastical player character races. I'm still looking for the perfect game to play a Githyanki in. You have no idea how badly I want to play a Githyanki. Oh man, give me the Gith. That's what I want. And I want to play him as a Githyanki and take all the racial benefits and keep some of these restrictions in mind when it comes to playing a character of this race. With the new book, Tasha's Cauldron of Whatever, if you want to play a dwarf but have a higher bonus in a different attribute than what a dwarf would normally have because you want to be like a unique kind of dwarf, the book says you can do that. Now, granted, it's all based on whether or not the Dungeon Master will be okay with that and everybody can agree to do this. But by not sticking to the various bonuses that come along with the various player races when it comes to designing your character, I mean, they've already gotten rid of the negative modifiers, so now all you have are positive modifiers based on what race you are. I think those are important. I think there are consequences that should come with making a decision regarding your imagined player character. And I feel like something that we're starting to see now is that everybody's just kind of like this base race in a different skin. That you can have a wizard this or a rogue that, and it doesn't matter what the race is, it's all just cosmetic. And while that's certainly important, because I mean, there's something to be said for having fun creating a character that you like and having them look cool, I feel like, again, there needs to be consequences to the decisions you make regarding your character creation. And that's something that I'm going to really try to focus on when it comes to the Harsch Kingdom setting. That when you decide to play a particular race, there is more than just a cool look. There are certain benefits to playing particular races, and I really want to kind of stick with that. I'm also going to be introducing a couple of races, new races that have very, very specific benefits and racial attributes and modifiers, and I really just want players to be able to experience the creativity that comes from working within these choices that you've made from the very beginning and exploring those characters. Not just having this fluid kind of, I'm going to play whatever in Goliath skin. You know? So that's something I want to do in the Harsch Kingdom setting. I also really want to pull back on all the magical items. There are magical items all over the place. I'm enjoying the game that I'm playing in right now. The magic is not all over the place, although my character did just get a magic sword, and that's cool, but I didn't get a magic sword until the character was 5th level, and I think that's kind of appropriate. I really feel like if there are magical items, if there's magical litter all over the place, again, if everybody's got magic items, are any of them really magical? My writing partner and longtime friend and, well, we're going to be fellow YouTubers together on an upcoming YouTube series next year, Mike Marisitz put it best when he referenced the movie The Incredibles. In the film, Syndrome is trying to give everybody superpowers, because if everybody's got superpowers, nobody's super anymore. And that's what I feel like is starting to happen with Dungeons and Dragons. I want the magical items to be truly magical and mystifying. It's going to be encouraged that these magical items all have names. No, you don't have a sword plus 1 fire damage. What you've got in your hands right there, adventurer, is the long sword of Aladir, which does extra fire damage when used against the enemies of the kingdom. It just sounds cooler. It feels cooler. It feels more magical to me, and I want to give that feeling to players in the Harsch Kingdom setting. I think magic is cool. My very first role-playing game character was a magic user, and I had a blast playing him. And I love building characters and seeing what magical things I can have him do. The game that I'm playing in right now, he does spells. He's a bard, so he does other things too, but he does spells, and I'm having a blast playing with those spells. But, you know, with all these subclasses and archetypes and all this other stuff thrown in there where everybody's doing magic left and right, I hesitate to say that I want to rein that in, because again, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. But I feel like there is another way to enjoy a dark fantasy game. I'm not talking about grimdark. The Harsch Kingdom is not grimdark. It's dark fantasy, and I know that line can sometimes be razor thin. Sometimes it's so thin that you can only cut it when using the long sword of Aladir, from what I understand. Am I going to be creating brand new rules for this game setting? Probably not, but I am going to be adding some extra things you can do here and there to make it feel more special for the players and for the Dungeon Master. And this will also translate over to what I'll be doing with the fiction that I'll be writing for the Harsch Kingdom setting as well. What am I actively doing right now to build the Harsch Kingdom campaign setting? Well, like I said, I have all these papers that I've had in various folders and notebooks from over the years. I took them all out, put them all together in one spot, blew the dust off of them, and really just took a look at what I've written down to see if it's still in line with what I had in mind. And right now I'm focusing on the various cities that exist within the kingdom itself. I'm pretty proud of some of the city stuff that I've got here. Some of it is just taking what I've written down in the past and transcribing it from this to my Rocket Book Everlast, and from that I'm going to take it over to Worldember and start inputting it there as well. But I'm also adding things. I mean, there are things that in my head have changed over the years regarding what I think is appropriate, what I think is neat, that sort of thing. And I'm really excited to tell you about cities like Harlow's Edge or Marsh Rock or Enix. And I'm really excited to tell you about the Dirty Market and the Great Temple and everything else that the Harsch Kingdom has to offer. I want to tell you about the neighboring community to Marsh Rock, where the cave elves live. I want to tell you about the southern towns in the Harsch Kingdom, where you've got mostly human settlements, but there's also a thriving sand elf community. I'm really excited to get into all of this. I'm excited to tell you about the Gorgonborn. I'm excited to tell you about the Trinitars and the Tumblebucks and everything else that I've got in the works. But I feel like most of this has to come from a solid starting point. And for me, that starting point are the cities, the towns, the settlements of the Harsch Kingdom setting. So that's what I'm working on right now. In the next video, I'll share a little bit more about my process creating these cities, and maybe even take you to what I'm doing at the Worldember website and provide you some links if you want to read along as I create this. I really struggled with whether or not I'm going to put any of this out there before it's published. Not because I thought maybe somebody would steal it or anything like that. I know better. I know that's very rarely happens, but I also was a little nervous about sharing my process with people before I actually have anything to show for what that process is creating. I'm just now getting back into 5th edition. How dare I come along and say like, well, I'm gonna fix Dungeons and Dragons. And I wanna be clear. I don't know what this was, but I wanna be clear. I'm not trying to fix Dungeons and Dragons. I'm really not. I love the game. I've only been playing 5e for a few months, but I've got such a history with the game. I love it. I'm not trying to fix it with the Harsch Kingdom. I just want to add to it and maybe give you a different kind of fun that you won't find in the Forgotten Realms, or Dragonlance if they work out their lawsuit, or Dark Sun, or Spelljammer if that really is going to be coming out. Who knows? But whatever those settings are, Harsch Kingdom's going to be something different. And I hope you find it to be something special. Thanks for watching this video. Once again, please consider subscribing and giving me a thumbs up. I do have more videos in the works right now for the Dice Monster Dice YouTube channel. As we get more subscribers, the closer I get to leveling up as a YouTuber, and actually will be able to get a custom URL for this YouTube channel. Right now, it's just youtube.com/blah, blah, 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 blah. We really want to just simplify things and get it to Dice Monster Dice, but to do that we need more subscribers. So please share this with all of your friends and stay tuned, because I've got a lot more coming for the Harsch Kingdom and for Dice Monster Dice. My name's Derek M. Cook, and I'll talk to you next time.
And when everyone's super, no one will be.